reaction then yesterday? Not a single Tory MP voted against this bill in the end.
Well, it would have been quite absurd for the second reading to be defeated. That's almost never happened in the history of Parliament. And it's even astonishing that we spent the weekend speculating about whether or not Rishi Sunak, with his majority, it's quite a large majority of MPs in the Commons, couldn't get the bill through. Now, there's a long way to go, but what we saw over the weekend was indicative of the weak leadership that we have from Rishi Sunak and the total chaos that there is in this government. And moreover, the fact that they are concentrating on a plan that's never going to work when there are people up and down the country worried sick about how they're going to pay their bills, how they're going to pay their mortgage if they come off a fixed rate, or their rent. There's so many problems in this country that need tackling, for which Labour has got a plan. The Tories seem to be absolutely nowhere on this, and we're just in chaos yet again.
Well, would you think have a plan for the Rwanda plan if you achieve power next year? Would it go straight in the bin?
Well, we know that this plan isn't going to work. The Permanent Secretary of the Home Office has said that there's no deterrent effect. The Court of Appeal has said that it's probably illegal. We know this plan isn't going to work, and the Prime Minister's facing criticisms from all sides about this. And what we've got at the moment is a plan, if we can even call it that would only ever take a few hundred people. Now, that's not going to deal with the backlog, and the Tories seem to have forgotten this is a problem of their own making. Just last year, 100,000 more people joined the asylum queue, and we've got a backlog of 130,000. Now, the Labour Party would recruit 1,000 more caseworkers to deal with that backlog urgently, because we may have people who are in hotels costing the taxpayer now £8 million per day, eye-watering, especially in a cost of living crisis, and without processing them, we've got no idea whether or not there are people there who really shouldn't be here, who are a danger to our country and our national security. Under a Labour government, with our plan, we would be getting them processed, and we'd be sending them home if they're not supposed to be here. But if they are entitled to be here, we want them to be able to get on with working and contributing to this country as they want to do, so that they can get on with their lives. Some of these people are Afghan interpreters and their families who we promised to keep safe. We are failing them. The government is failing the British taxpayer at a cost of £8 million per day on hotels, and failing them with the Rwanda plan that's never going to work.
Do you think we've failed the man on board the Bibi Stockholm who died yesterday?
Absolutely. It's utterly tragic to hear that news, and my heart goes out to him and his family and people who knew him. It's desperately sad, and I think it points to the fact that we need an actual plan for dealing with the backlog. Now, there will be an investigation clearly into the circumstances of this man's death, so it wouldn't be appropriate for me to comment in more detail on that specific example. But we do need a government that is ready to tackle the backlog, so we're not having to use boats like this or barges like this.
I think our audience would agree that we do need an actual plan to deal with the backlog, and I'm still not clear what yours is. I mean, you say 1,000 extra caseworkers, that comes at a cost. But if I could just finish my point, you're going to pay extra money for those caseworkers, that's absolutely fine. But just tell me how you speed up that system when these people are arriving on their shores, either deliberately or as a consequence of fleeing a disaster, without any ID. How do you speed up that process? I mean, I want to hear your actual plan.
With 1,000 caseworkers who are at a higher grade than those currently used, who are skilled and competent, the government over the last 8 years since I became an MP has ground down the asylum seeker caseworker system, so that people are just not getting answers within months or years. That's on the Tories. Now, under Labour, with 1,000 more caseworkers, we would be processing people quickly as soon as they got here. We would also have a returns agreement with our neighbouring countries so that we could return people properly and promptly, like the last Labour government did, I have to say, in contrast to the current Tory one. We would make sure that we had family reunion arrangements for those people who are entitled to come, for instance, from Afghanistan, so that they don't feel forced to put their lives in the hands of dangerous people traffickers. And we would pay for that by not spending the money that the government has committed to the Rwanda plan, which is never going to work. That's an actual plan that Labour's got, as opposed to the government plan, which is never going to work.
The government would say they are continuing to look for further returns agreements. So that is not a big distinction with you on all of that. I just finally want to get your reaction to the breaking news this morning. This is the surprise contraction of the economy, down 0.3%. It was expected to flatline. It was up in September, and it's down 0.3. Quite a shock this morning.
Well, shocking but not surprising, because we've had 13 years of stagnant growth under successive Tory governments with no industrial strategy. In fact, if you go to the government's website, you just see the words archived. This is not a government that's trying to grow the economy. It's not a government that's paying attention to the cost of living crisis facing working people up and down the country. This is a government that is asleep. It is failing the country. It's focused on gimmicks when we have a weak Prime Minister who doesn't seem to know what working people are going through at the minute. It's distressing, and there will be people waking up this morning wondering how they're going to get through the winter. Now, under a Labour government, we would have a plan for a decade of national renewal, tackling that cost of living crisis as a priority, but putting the economy at the heart of everything we do. Because without firm fiscal rules, which under Rachel Reeves as our Chancellor we would have, you cannot do anything. And that's the problem with this government. They have failed to grow the economy, so our hospitals are crumbling. We would do something about that. Our schools are not able to cope with crises like the rack in the roofs of some of them. That's on the government. So when we look at this falling levels of growth and failure on the cost of living crisis, I'm afraid to say we have to point firmly at Rishi Sunak, who's been Chancellor during some of those years and is now currently Prime Minister, flailing around with gimmicks and failing to get a grip on the country's problems.
Okay.
Thank Debonair. Thank you very much indeed. Thank as the Shadow Secretary of State for Digital Culture, Media and Sport.